Now we're going to start talking about these E minor pentatonic licks. So that E minor pentatonic scale that we looked at is right here. Well, look what we've been doing all this work so far. C chord, right? G, D, D, A. These pentatonic scales will overlap with the chord shapes, and with E minor pentatonic, it's right there in that part of the neck. And one of the reasons that I work this way with students in the studio is usually people learn this E minor pentatonic scale. That's usually the first scale we know, right? And then the rest of the neck is kind of like this weird mystery. So with the intro of Hey Joe and the solo, that gives us a good workout in the open position, moving between those E minor pentatonic scales, and then up here. So that's really important, but we need to fill in all this territory, and this is a great way to do it. So remember when we were playing this E chord like this? This is a G sharp. That's the third of the chord. This goes back to the theory triad thing. But when we play minor pentatonic, we're playing the minor third. So if the rhythm is playing this E chord, this is where the tension and resolve happens around. You don't have to bend all the way up. You can do a quarter bend. You can slide. It's about targeting the third of that E chord. And this was lost on me for a while. Like all guitar players, we just learn these shapes and we just kind of go through the process of playing through the shapes and then trying to play the shapes faster, but not really thinking about how does it work with the underlying chord progression, and why is this person targeting these notes all the time. So if we look at now, if we start looking at these licks, I've written out some of these. I've written out all these licks for a very specific purpose, and that is to give you 2 beats on the front end to get into the lick, and a beat or 2 on the back end to get out, so you can get back to the C chord. So this first lick, if we're going through the progression with the song, we're going to just start right in this E minor pentatonic. I think these first 6 licks are based right out of this scale that's on your PDF. Now, I wanted to create some licks that would allow you to think about phrasing, timing, targeting notes, and resting on notes. Because one of the mistakes I made is I was just playing these patterns and not knowing what I was doing and ending on weird notes. So if you look at this this first lick, it's right out of pentatonic, but we're going to stop on that note. Why? Because if we look at our E chord, that note is in there. That's the 5th of the chord. And if you look at the chord shape or the pentatonic scale, that note's in there. So we're going to be really specific about targeting notes. So this lick will go like this. So we pick the 7, slide into the 9, let it breathe, slide from the 9 to the 7, grab that 5, put a slight pull on it, and end on that 7. That's an E note. And the reason we're pulling this 5, that's the G. We're going to give it a little bend, just a little bit, to get it to that kind of G sharp. Again, it's that tension thing. End on a root note. That's why I was telling you to find it. If all you do is find an E, it's important. But now you can see how the overlap with the scale, the chord, and knowing at least where the root note is, and then being able to identify the third. Because we have 2 measures of this E chord. So if you listen to the song, he's singing, he's playing, he might be down here, like in the, he's always doing that kind of stuff. He might be up here, right? And then when it stops, that's a good time to make a move. And if you spend a lot of time in a recording studio or working with singer-songwriters and you kind of get out of your guitar brain a little bit, you're looking for pieces of real estate to make a statement and be additive to the song, to help create a hook, a melodic idea, kind of fill some space. but not just like, that's not the time to just open the floodgates in this situation. So we're going to be very intentional with this. And if you can't get that bend on that 5, don't worry about it. Just get there. Just do this. Just get back to that 7, okay? So we're going to have this E for 2 chords, 2, and then we do this. And I wrote the vibrato in there because one of the, we're going to do a lot of work on vibrato because that's a big staple of Hendrix's playing. He has a lot of control over his vibrato, and he's got a great vibrato, especially at the top of bends. That's hard to do. It requires a lot of hand strength. So we're going to get a lot of that too. So we're going to get this. Okay, let's try that a couple times together. Again. Now we're going to play it in context with example number 1 from our rhythm idea that we learned. So we're going to have to do this. Here's your E. You have 2 beats, and then you have to back to C. Now we got to get back to the C. So knowing where you are in the chord progression is super, super important. So if you need to pause and practice that example number 1, the rhythm idea, and then come back to this minor pentatonic idea sheet, this idea one, that's fine. Just work that out. That's part of the technique game. And then don't feel like you have to get it perfect, because we're going to turn on the recording at the slow tempo, the backing track, and we're going to use that as kind of our sparring partner. Again, the athletic analogy. You can do all this work outside of the track, and you should probably get it about, 80% there, and then you got to get in the track, and you have to be willing to stumble around and make mistakes and kind of spar around until you line up the timing of where you need to be with the lick on the E chord, getting back to the C chord, making your transitions. This is a great way to work on your technique, is to clean it out, clean it up, be intentional within the track. Don't get hung up on perfectionism. And that was a big one for me. I still struggle with it. I don't know anybody that doesn't struggle with it, is this idea of perfection. That's not a thing. It's a concept, not a good one, but you can listen to live recordings of Hendrix. You can listen to, pro musicians, and man, sometimes we just miss stuff. We rush, we miss notes. It happens, especially if you're playing live and you're improvising. You're walking a tightrope. And bands like the Allman Brothers or Tedeschi Trucks or, Hendrix, I mean, when you're just going for it, sometimes you're going to miss. But the more you put yourself in that situation where you're going for it, you're going to get better, and you're going to close those margins, and you're going to be more consistent. So keep that in mind, and don't get hung up on missing things. Just keep going. If you miss this lick, just get back to the C chord in time for that rhythm idea. If you miss the C chord, don't stop. The G is coming. So that will help you have a framework of like where you need to get in and out, and if you miss something, how you recover. Pros miss things, but a lot of people don't notice it because they recover well. So that's just how it goes. So let's turn on the track, and we're going to work out example 1 with the E minor pentatonic idea 1. Here we go. One, two. C. One, two. See how much space you have before the E? That's what makes it sound so musical. You're not trying to fill everything in. Now notice I'm giving you space on the E. So when I play this A, I'm already on an E note. So I'm just letting that ring through because it's the fifth of the A chord, it's the root of the E chord, and it's the E note that we're going to start on to play our lick. So sometimes you can get away with that, but you can't always assume that you're going to be able to hang out on that last chord tone, and we're going to address that later. So part of learning phrasing and not just getting stuck in arpeggios and technique and scales is to do stuff like this, where you're jamming along with the track and you're thinking about what's musically appropriate here, and pay attention to what's going on in the recording, because they're usually showing you their playbook and they're showing you what's important to them. They may be trying to fill all the space, but in things like this, letting it breathe is a really smart way to play. I think you'll see that a lot with pro guitar players when people say, oh, they make it look easy, or they're just doing pentatonic, man. Well, yeah, that's true, but how are they lining this stuff up? What's the timing? What's the phrasing? What are they going to let breathe? I think that's why B.B. King is such a devastating guitar player, because he has impeccable timing, his note selection and his phrasing. It's just like, it's perfect. It's just perfect. So you're going to see the same thing with Hendrix, whether he's really burning and going for it, or he's playing like with some space and playing like more kind of melodic material. His timing is really great. And Mayer's like that too. Stevie Ray Vaughan, really great rhythm players, and picking and choosing when they're dipping in and out of playing licks. Okay, now let's try that again. Let's try it with a faster tempo and see what happens. If you stumble, don't worry about it. Just stay on track with the chord progression. One, two. Beat 3. Here comes the C. One, two. Okay, let's do that same thing, but let's do it over example 2 for the rhythm. Okay, let's try that slow and then fast. So remember, we have our chord shapes. And then look where we are. There's our E right there. So we're going to have to shift a finger. But our lick is right there. Okay, here we go. One, two. Back to our C chord. Notice how I have to get off that A chord. I don't want to be hanging out on that A chord over the E. See, it sounds weird. I got to get off that. Even though that E note is in the A chord, it's not like before where I could let it bleed through. I've got to be really intentional about getting off this chord. And I'm just hitting an open E before it on the thick string. I won't do it this time though. And you keep in mind, Hendrix was the only guitar player in the band, so he's got to move between rhythm and lead. Kind of varied the lick that time because I was trying to talk. Now let's try it a little faster. This is the album, more the album tempo. Same exercise though. So I'm just looking for those chord shapes. 1, 2. So the first time I played that lick, I varied it a little bit, but then I played it as written. That's another thing too, is you can always start playing with the phrasing of these licks. You can repeat ideas. That's where the improv and the variation comes from. That's why it's important to study other guitar players, learn their licks, jam along with it, and try to figure out how you can start massaging it, because you only have those 2 measures of E. So you can move this stuff around, but you have to be intentional of where you are in the progression. So whether you pick this or hammer it or slide, it doesn't really matter so much. But the timing and the phrasing is where a lot of work needs to happen, that I think the sooner we start doing that, I know when I do that with my students in person, they progress faster. Just working on technique all the time usually means you're not working on phrasing, note selection, dynamics, hand control, things like that. Okay, let's bring in this idea number 2.